They were a picture-perfect family, a loving couple with two beautiful children, living in a quaint house in Medicine Hat, Alberta. But beneath the surface of suburban bliss lurked a darkness so profound it would erupt in one of the most shocking family massacres in Canadian history. It all began with Jasmine Richardson, a 12-year-old girl who by all accounts was just like any other preteen. She was bright, friendly, and well-liked by her peers. But as she entered her teenage years, something in Jasmine began to change. Like many kids her age, Jasmine was eager to find her own identity, separate from the expectations of her family and the norms of society. She was drawn to the Gothic subculture, with its dark clothing, heavy makeup, and fascination with the macabre. But for Jasmine, what started as a harmless exploration of self-expression soon spiraled into something far more sinister. Jasmine's transformation began when she met Jeremy Steinke, a 23-year-old man who would soon become the most dangerous influence in her life. Jeremy was a troubled soul, a man who had endured a lifetime of abuse and neglect. He had dropped out of high school, was unemployed, and lived in a trailer park with his alcoholic mother. Jeremy was deeply entrenched in the Gothic and punk scenes, but he also harbored delusions that were far darker. He believed himself to be a 300-year-old werewolf, a creature of the night with a thirst for blood. When he met Jasmine at a local punk rock show, their connection was immediate and intense. Despite the significant age difference, Jasmine and Jeremy quickly became inseparable. They communicated obsessively through text messages, emails, and social media, with Jasmine often sneaking out to meet Jeremy in secret. Jasmine's parents, Mark and Deborah Richardson, were concerned. They saw Jeremy for what he was: a dangerous predator with an unhealthy fixation on their daughter. They forbade Jasmine from seeing him, hoping to protect her from his influence. But instead of driving them apart, their disapproval only deepened the couple's bond. The more her parents tried to keep them apart, the more Jasmine rebelled. Her relationship with Jeremy grew darker and more intense, fueled by their shared love of all things Gothic and their growing resentment of Jasmine's parents. Together, they began to fantasize about a life without rules, without restrictions, without her family. These fantasies soon turned into something far more dangerous: a plan to eliminate the obstacles standing between them and their twisted version of happiness. The idea of murdering her family didn't emerge overnight. It was the product of months of toxic communication between Jasmine and Jeremy, during which they fed each other's darkest impulses. In one particularly disturbing message, Jasmine wrote, "I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." Jeremy, ever the eager enabler, responded, "Well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative with details and stuff." In the weeks leading up to the murders, Jasmine and Jeremy meticulously plotted how they would carry out the killings. They discussed every detail, from how they would enter the house to the weapons they would use. Jeremy was determined to prove his love for Jasmine, and for her, this was the ultimate test of loyalty. They were like characters in their own twisted love story, each feeding off the other's darkness until there was no turning back. On the night of April 22, 2006, their deadly plan was put into motion. It was a typical Saturday evening in the Richardson household. Mark and Deborah were winding down after a long day, while 8-year-old Tyler was already asleep in his bed. Jasmine had been in her room, seemingly just another teenager spending a quiet night at home. But beneath the surface, she was filled with anticipation and dread, knowing that the hours ahead would change everything. At some point during the night, Jasmine quietly let Jeremy into the house. He had come prepared, armed with a knife and steely determination. The couple exchanged a final look, a silent agreement that there was no going back. Then they descended into the basement, where Jasmine's mother, Deborah, was doing laundry. Jeremy, driven by a mix of fear, rage, and twisted love, lunged at Deborah with the knife, stabbing her repeatedly. She didn't stand a chance. The noise from the attack woke Mark, who rushed downstairs to find his wife being brutally attacked. He fought desperately to protect her, but Jeremy, in a frenzy, turned his weapon on him. Mark was stabbed 24 times as he tried to fend off his attacker. His last words were a desperate why, to which Jeremy coldly replied, "Because your daughter wanted it this way." With those words, Mark's world shattered as he realized the horrific truth that his own daughter had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. While Jeremy was attacking her parents in the basement, Jasmine made her way upstairs to her brother's room. Tyler was asleep, unaware of the horror unfolding around him. But Jasmine knew what she had to do. In her mind, this was the final act that would free her from the constraints of her family and allow her to be with Jeremy forever. With trembling hands, she approached her brother's bed, knife in hand. Accounts of what happened next vary. Some say Jasmine hesitated. Others say Jeremy had to push her to follow through, but what is certain is that Jasmine, driven by a desire to prove herself to Jeremy, stabbed her brother in the throat. The act was brutal and swift, and in that moment, any innocence she had left was obliterated. After the murders, the house fell silent. The Richardson family, once full of life, love, and laughter, had been reduced to a blood-soaked crime scene. But for Jasmine and Jeremy, there was no time to dwell on what they had done. They had to get away before the bodies were discovered. They fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a town that would soon be plunged into shock and disbelief. The next morning, as the sun rose over Medicine Hat, a young boy came knocking at the Richardson home, hoping to play with his friend Tyler. When no one answered, he peered through the basement window and saw the carnage inside. He ran home, terrified, to tell his mother, who immediately called the police. The officers who responded to the scene were unprepared for the horror that awaited them. As they entered the home, they were met with a sight so gruesome it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In the basement, they found the bodies of Mark and Deborah lying in pools of blood. The walls and ceiling were splattered with evidence of the violent struggle that had taken place. Upstairs in his bed, Tyler lay dead, his throat slashed so deeply that it was nearly severed. But as they searched the house, they realized something was missing Jasmine. There was no sign of her anywhere. Fearing she had been abducted by the killers, the police issued an Amber Alert, desperately hoping to find her alive. But as they dug deeper into the case, the truth began to emerge. Jasmine wasn't a victim. She was a perpetrator, the mastermind behind the massacre. Investigators uncovered a trove of digital evidence, text messages, emails, and online chats that revealed the full extent of Jasmine and Jeremy's plot. The realization that a 12-year-old girl could be capable of such calculated evil sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Within 24 hours, the couple was found hiding out in Jeremy's truck, just miles from the scene of the crime. They were arrested without incident, but the damage had already been done. The once idyllic Richardson family was no more, destroyed by the very person they had loved and cared for. Jasmine and Jeremy's arrest marked the end of their dark journey, but the scars they left behind would linger for years to come. Jasmine, because of her age, was sentenced to only 6 years in a juvenile detention center, followed by 4 years of community supervision, the maximum sentence allowed under Canadian law for someone her age. Jeremy, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The aftermath of the murders left a community forever scarred. Mark and Deborah Richardson were remembered as loving parents who did everything they could to protect their daughter, only to have their lives cut short by the very person they were trying to save. Tyler, an innocent child, was robbed of his future by a sister who should have been his guardian. And Jasmine? She walked out of prison in 2016. At the age of 22, her record expunged, her identity changed, and her past hidden from the world. But can someone who has committed such atrocities ever truly escape their past? Can society ever truly forgive? Today, Jasmine lives a new life, under a new name, in a new place. But the memory of her crime still lingers in Medicine Hat, a town that will never forget the dark spring day when innocence was lost, and a family was torn apart by one of its own. The question that haunts us all is this: can someone so young, so capable of such evil, ever truly be rehabilitated? Or is Jasmine Richardson doomed to carry the weight of her crimes forever? A reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear the most are the ones we least expect.